In 1954, Ford unveiled an all-new engine, the 239 cubic inch Y-block V8, promising a new era of power and innovation for American drivers. Advertised as power for the modern age, it was hailed by the press as proof of Ford's post-war comeback. But behind that proud roar lay another story, one far more complicated and controversial. Because this engine wasn't just the bridge between the old Flathead and the future Windsor, it was also a bold technical gamble that nearly backfired. Something deep within its design frustrated thousands of mechanics and car owners alike. And that flaw forced Ford to rethink its entire V8 philosophy within just a few short years. So, what really happened to the engine once praised as Ford's new pride? To understand why Ford had to turn a new page, we have to go back to the 1930s. The Flathead V8 was Ford's greatest pride. Introduced in 1932, it became a symbol of power and affordability, allowing millions of Americans to experience a real V8 car for the first time. But by the early 1950s, that legacy was starting to crumble. The Flathead ran hot, often cracked its cylinder heads, and could no longer meet the rising demands for performance. Meanwhile, competitors like Oldsmobile's Rocket 88 and Cadillac's 331 OHV had already proven that the future belonged to overhead valve engines. Ford knew that without change, it would be left behind. So, in 1953, deep inside Ford's secret Dearborn labs, the Y-block project was born. The name Y came from its deep skirt block, shaped like the letter Y, designed for extra rigidity and strength. This wasn't a patch for the Flathead, it was a completely new design, stronger and more advanced. The 239 cubic inch Y-block V8 featured a deep skirt block that wrapped around the crankshaft, making it stronger and nearly twist-proof, a true feat of engineering. But it also came with a price: weight. At nearly 650 pounds, the Y-block was among the heaviest small-displacement V8 engines of its time. Ford kept the camshaft inside the block, using push rods and rocker arms to actuate valves, a standard but maintenance-heavy layout. The biggest controversy, however, lay in its reverse-flow oiling system, where oil traveled through the block before reaching the heads. Just a bit of sludge could starve the top end, leading to dry rockers and a distinctive metallic chatter. Mechanics nicknamed it the temperamental beast, strong and reliable, but unforgiving if neglected. And in 1954, Ford officially introduced the 239 Y-block 5.8 in its mainline, custom line, and crestline models. Television ads proudly called it the engine for the modern age, while dealerships across America showcased it as the symbol of Ford's rebirth. With 130 horsepower, a solid figure for a mid-sized engine, Ford was confident it had entered the OHV era. The Y-block's voice turned heads nationwide. Its deep, raspy rumble had a heartbeat of its own, what enthusiasts would later call the Y-bark. Magazines described it as a new voice for Ford, strong, mature, and unmistakable. On the highway, Crestline 5.8s ran smooth and steady, delivering a confidence Flathead owners could only dream of. For a brief moment, Ford celebrated it as proof of progress. Dealers reported booming sales, especially in the western states where power and reliability mattered most. And hot rodders quickly discovered that beneath the 239's modest image lay a powerhouse waiting to be unleashed. The Y-shaped deep skirt block was so rigid that it could withstand stress, torque, and high revs far beyond what Ford engineers had envisioned. Local racers began experimenting, raising compression ratios installing hotter cams, adding dual carburetors. The results were shocking. The 239 not only survived, it thrived at 6,000 RPM, roaring with that unmistakable raspy tone that racers called the Y-bark. Soon, modified Fairlanes and Thunderbirds powered by Y-blocks appeared at drag strips across California, Texas, and Kansas. Drivers loved their stability, torque, and that heavy mechanical growl unlike any other V8 of the decade. The Y-block was no longer the family motor. It was the foundation of American horsepower. Born not in corporate labs, but in backyard garages, many gearheads called the 239 the Iron Fighter. Heavy, yes, but almost indestructible. Even after Ford released the 272 and 292, many mechanics kept their 239 blocks as the trusted base for serious performance builds. It was in those garages that the Y-block found its second life, not in showrooms, but on racetracks, proving that sometimes Ford didn't need to outsell its rivals, only to leave them in the dust. But while racers admired its strength, a quieter issue began emerging in everyday garages, and it had nothing to do with power, but with oil. Owners started complaining about a faint tapping sound from the top end, especially after long drives or overdue oil changes. At first, many blamed wear, but when mechanics tore the engines apart, they discovered the real culprit: Ford's unique oiling layout. Unlike most competitors, the Y-block used a circuitous route. Oil traveled through the camshaft bearings and up the push rods before reaching the rocker arms. It maintained pressure well, but if the oil was dirty or thickened, those narrow passages could clog, starving the top end and producing that telltale tapping sound. Ford insisted this wasn't a design flaw. It was the driver's neglect. Engineers argued that the Y-block was meant for those who changed oil frequently and used high-quality lubricants, a luxury not common in the dusty, low-grade oil conditions of the 1950s. By 1956, Ford quietly revised the system, widening passages, upgrading push rods, and improving filtration. Yet the oil-hungry Y-block stigma had already taken hold. Across countless garages, mechanics added external oil lines as insurance and as a badge of authenticity, proof that a true Y-block lived under the hood. But while people continued to argue whether Ford had made a mistake or simply gone too far ahead of its time, the engineers at Dearborn were quietly preparing for the boldest step in the Y-block's history. Building on the original 239, Ford began experimenting with new configurations to find the engine's true limits. The 272 cubic inch version emerged with a longer stroke, refined combustion chambers, and higher compression, pushing output to over 170 horsepower, a major leap from the original. But just a year later, the 292 arrived, producing nearly 200 horsepower and quickly becoming Ford's new performance icon, most famously as the power plant of the first Thunderbird, the company's debut sports car. What's remarkable is that none of these improvements were meant to erase the 239, but to prove that the Y-block still had life left in it. Engineers dubbed it the engine that refused to die. Each wave of criticism only made it come back stronger. The 239 paved the way. The 272 proved its flexibility, and the 292 put Ford toe-to-toe with Chevy's 265 V8. Yet behind those victories lay a growing realization. Each expansion made the Y-block heavier, costlier, and harder to maintain. In their quest to dominate through raw power, Ford had unintentionally built a masterpiece too conservative in structure, a design destined to be outpaced by the era itself. By the late 1950s, the automotive world was shifting. Performance now had to coexist with efficiency. Every pound of steel mattered, and buyers started caring about reliability and running costs as much as horsepower. In that new era, Chevrolet's 283 small block V8, lighter, cheaper, and easier to produce, quickly became the industry benchmark. Ford, while proud of the Y-block's torque, realized that power alone was no longer enough. The engine's deep skirt structure, once praised for strength, had become a liability, making servicing tedious and expensive. Manufacturing costs also ran high, limiting Ford's ability to scale production for its mass-market models. Inside Dearborn, a new generation of engineers began working quietly on a smaller, lighter, and more versatile V8. They no longer wanted to patch the Y-block. They wanted to reinvent Ford's entire V8 philosophy. And in 1962, after nearly 8 years of loyal service, the Y-block quietly bowed out. There was no farewell announcement, no public tribute. It simply disappeared from the Fairlane and Galaxy lineups, replaced by the Windsor small block, which ushered in a new era, one defined not by weight or displacement, but by efficiency and adaptability. Today, the Y-block stands as a cornerstone in Ford's engineering evolution. It marked the turning point from the old Flathead to the modern OHV era, laying the foundation for the small block family that followed. Without the Y-block, there would be no Windsor, no Cleveland, and certainly no Boss, the engines that would later define Ford's golden age of performance. But what truly makes the Y-block legendary is its spirit. Despite criticism over oil leaks and complex maintenance, it proved remarkably durable. Countless F-100s, Fairlanes, and Thunderbirds powered by Y-blocks still run strong today, a testament that its strength wasn't just forged in metal, but in the pride of those who built it. Now, in vintage car shows and restored racing events, the Y-block roars again. Young mechanics see rebuilding one as a way to touch Detroit's past, an era when craftsmanship ruled and pride was measured by the sound of an engine. And when that rumble echoes once more, it reminds everyone that legends never die. They just take on a new form. If you've ever heard the roar of a Y-block, you know why it still makes car lovers' hearts race after all these years. It's more than just the sound of steel and fuel. It's the echo of an era when America believed every limit could be broken with one push of the throttle. Share your story in the comments. Have you ever owned, driven, or simply heard a Y-block engine in action? Or if you could choose, which would you keep? The original 239, the powerful 272, or the legendary 292? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about forgotten engines and machines that once shook Detroit. Because every time we remember them, legends like the Y-block live again, in memory, in sound, and in the unending passion that keeps this history alive.